Welcome to HTML Basics. So let's understand what is HTML. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So what is hypertext? Hypertext is basically all the images, videos, text and all those data that is being transferred over the web is called as hypertext. Okay, and what is a markup language? Well, markup is a language using which you mark the contents. You mark the purpose of that content using the markup language. So we'll understand how the HTML is written and what markups are there in the HTML. Okay, but for the full form of the HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So in order to mark your hypertext, you use the markup language. So let's understand what is the purpose of HTML. Well, HTML is used to describe the structure of the web page. So if you look at the websites, all the structure, like you have a heading, you have a paragraph, you have subheadings, then you have a footer, then you have a header. All the structures is being defined using HTML. Okay, so the purpose of HTML, when you write HTML, is basically you are describing the structure of the web page. And HTML is used to describe how the content should be displayed on the web browser. So when you're developing a website, HTML will give you some tags using which you can describe how those contents should be displayed onto the web page. So that's the purpose of the HTML. Well, we have met these two gentlemen, Jim from USA and Bob in Australia, in the web basics section. If you haven't covered that web basics section and jumped directly to HTML section, then what we covered in that web basics, we talked about Jim staying in USA and he's a buyer and is thinking to buy a phone for a cheaper price. Bob in Australia, he want to sell a phone for a cheaper price and he want to sell a phone, right? So Jim being the buyer and Bob being the seller, they want to exchange information. So we discussed about all those things in the web basics. So if you want to understand more about what we discussed, you can go back to web basics topic. So let's understand how an information can be exchanged between Jim and the Bob and how HTML basically help us to do that. So in that context, we'll understand what is the purpose of the HTML and what role does it play. Okay. So we have discussed about client side and the server side. Let's do a quick review. Client side is basically Jim opening up a browser and typing bob.com. Then the request is sent to the bob.com to fetch the data. Bob.com receives that request, send the response with the data to the browser, right? And one who is initiating the request is called as requester, and one who is responding the request is called as provider. And provider basically is called as server side, which actually have all the hypertext, which has the images, video, music files and text. Everything is available at the server side. And from the client side, you initiate the request to fetch those details from the server. Let's understand what is the purpose of the HTML. What is that job that HTML does in the client server technology? So imagine the situation wherein browser is trying to send a request and server is sending the response. The first thing that happens is Bob will type a URL, right? It will type saying that page.html. This is what I want from the bob.com. And this request is sent to bob.com. The bob.com basically have a HTML page. Okay, this is where you will write your HTML page and call it as a page.html. That is the extension of the HTML page. And in this page, you will link all the resources on the server. Okay, and once this page is written and it linked to all its resources, that page is sent back from the server to the client. And what is written inside the HTML page? The HTML page is basically connecting all the resources on the system and it is displaying the data onto the browser. Okay, HTML is used to describe the content on the browser. Remember the definition of HTML. So if you want to show any of the hypertext content sitting inside the server, you write an HTML page and you link all those resources in the HTML page, and then anybody request for that HTML page is sent back as a response to the browser, and browser has the capability to display that HTML code into the browser. Okay, so when we write and run an HTML page, we'll try to understand how the content has been displayed onto the web browser. Okay, but from here you have to understand the purpose of the HTML is to embed all the resources from the server, and second purpose is to display the content onto the web browser. So in short, the main purpose of HTML is to embed the resource on the server. The resources could be video, image, text, data, anything that is sitting on the server. You want to display that onto the client machine, onto the browser. When you create something called as HTML page, and you write HTML code in it, and that code can be used to display the content from the server onto the client machine. Well, HTML uses something called as markup language, and you can use the markup language to mark the content on the page. For an example, you want to display an image, you mark that image as an image into using the markup language, and you say, oh, here I want to display an image. If you want to display a video from a server, you basically mark that up into the HTML page, say, oh, at this point you should be displaying a video. Okay, so all the things that you're doing in HTML is basically you're trying to mark up the content on the page. Okay, that's all you're doing in the HTML page. And how the markup looks like, let me show you an example. So this is a markup. If you want to display a paragraph, right, you want to write a paragraph of text, you mark it up with something called as markup. A markup looks like you have a less than symbol, greater than symbol, then you have a tag name, that's basically the name of the markup. Then there is a starting point and an ending point. The starting point will have less than and greater than, and then the name of the tag, and the ending tag will have the forward slash. That's nothing but the slash. Okay, so this is a starting point, this is an ending point, and anything inside is you are marking it up. You are marking up and saying this is a paragraph. Okay, instead of that, you can even mark up an image, you can mark up a video, you can mark up an heading, and then say this is basically an heading. Well, this is the instruction that is given in the HTML file. So when the web browser reads this instruction, it knows how it need to print those data onto the web browser. So HTML is really marking up the content and telling the browser how do you display this data onto the browser. So let's take an example. On the right hand side on the server, you have these files like page.html, dog1.jpg and dog.mpg. You have a video, you have an image, and then you have a HTML file. So all the things that you do in HTML code is you will write markup language, you will mark all the contents onto the server. Okay, if you want to display an image, you will use an image tag. If you want to display a video, you will use a video tag. So you're basically telling the browser, okay, this is the image and the path is here, please print it. This is the video, the path is here, please print it. So that's the job of an HTML. You are marking up the contents, and those contents are sitting somewhere in the server. Okay, it is embedding all the resources in the internet. If you want to link pages like one page to another, again in HTML code you will say, okay, now when someone click this, please go there. Well, that's the power of the HTML. Okay, and when HTML is displayed in the browser, it reads all this HTML code and it say, oh, now you're asking me to print a heading. So I will increase the font and make it more bigger so that anybody can see the heading. And then it says, okay, you want me to display an image, let me display an image. And where is the resource? The resource is going back to the server and say the file is somewhere here. Then you want to display a video, then again the path to the video has been given. Okay, then you say there is a footer and then there's basically some paragraphs in it. So try to realize this, that HTML code is a markup language. You are marking up the content and describing the structure of the web page. And where do you display the HTML page? You display the HTML page on the browser. And browser understands the HTML code and try to display the markup language that has been written to display the content on the web browser. What are the markup language? How they should write it? This is what we'll learn in this section. Alright, so let's do a quick summary of what is HTML. HTML is a markup language. You use markup to mark the content on the web page. Markups are used in the HTML page to mark the contents. HTML is used to describe how the content should be displayed on the browser. That's the purpose of the HTML. It is an instruction to the browser to say display the content like this. That's all is HTML all about. One of the most powerful thing about HTML, that HTML page helps to link all the resources on the server. So if you have to connect all the files around the internet, you can do it via the HTML. HTML has that power that it can connect any resources sitting under any server which is publicly available to access. You can mark those things inside the HTML. Okay, it's really connecting things together in the internet. That's the power of HTML. And how does all these things happen? The client browser sends the request to access that HTML page. Remember, HTML page is sitting at the server, right? And someone has to initiate that request. So client browser send the request to access that HTML page. Then server sends that HTML page to the client browser. Then the client browser understand that markup and display that content onto the web browser. Okay, that's how the whole HTML scenario works, and that's how all the resources on the server is accessed via the client via using this client server technology. Okay, and understand what is HTML. HTML is a markup language which is used to describe the content onto the web browser. Well, that's all about what is HTML. Let's build some HTML pages and understand in detail.